All right, let's talk about what just happened, because most people around the world don't even realize how big this was. They think it was just another politician giving just another speech, saying some smart sounding words in front of a crowd, but no, this wasn't that. This wasn't a casual press conference. This was calculated, sharp, precise, and delivered with the kind of calm that makes powerful men nervous. You see, when most leaders speak, they raise their voice, pound the table, wave their hands. That's how they try to make you feel the weight of their words. But there's another level of mastery, a level where you don't need to shout, you don't need to threaten, you don't even need to show emotion, because your words themselves become the weapon. And that's exactly what Jaishankar just did. It wasn't noise, it was silence between the lines that did the damage. It was the pauses, the subtle emphasis, the way each sentence carried the kind of power that made even the world's strongest economies shift uncomfortably in their chairs. The man didn't just speak to a room, he spoke to the entire planet. And here's the thing, when you operate at that level, you don't just get attention, you command respect. Because deep down people know, calm is dangerous. Calm means you've already measured your opponent, you've already run the numbers, you've already predicted the outcome, and you're speaking from a place of certainty, not hope. He wasn't talking just to answer a question. He was sending a coded message. It wasn't for the journalists in front of him. It wasn't even for the politicians in his immediate audience. It was for the decision makers who sit in the most guarded rooms on earth, the ones who think they control the world. They heard it, they understood it, and they knew exactly what he meant without him ever spelling it out. That's the art of true diplomacy. You don't need to throw a punch for people to feel like they've been hit. And here's where most of the world misses the point. They think power is only in the army you control, the money you have, or the allies you gather. They think that if you want to shake the world, you have to do it with sanctions, bombs, or screaming matches at international summits. But real power is making the other side question their every move, without lifting a single finger. Real power is when they go home after your speech and start calling emergency meetings because they're not sure what you meant, but they know they can't ignore it. What Jaishankar just did was plant seeds, seeds of doubt, seeds of caution, seeds of fear, and that's what a smart nation does. You don't tell the world your next move, you make them wonder about it. You keep them guessing, keep them off balance. Because uncertainty is the most underrated weapon in international politics. It makes even the strongest adversary hesitate, and hesitation, that's the moment where the tide turns. Now, you gotta understand something. This man didn't get here by accident. Every word was the result of years of observation, negotiation, and survival in a game where one wrong statement can crash your economy or spark a conflict. And unlike so many leaders who use their position to seek applause, this wasn't a performance. This was strategy in real time. He wasn't looking for cheers from the crowd. He was delivering a message to those who think they can dictate terms to India. And the beauty of it is, he said it all without actually saying it. No open threats, no dramatic finger pointing, no breaking news headlines about a declaration of war. Just a calm acknowledgement that India will do what it must, when it must, without asking anyone's permission. And let me tell you, in the game of global power, that's the sentence that keeps people awake at night. Because when a nation signals it no longer seeks your approval, you've already lost control over them. The timing of this was no accident either. The global stage right now is a mess. Trade wars, military standoffs, economic blackmail. And right in the middle of it, India is rising, not by begging for a seat at the table, but by building its own table. And Jaishankar's words were a subtle reminder that India is not here to be anyone's pawn. You could feel it in the room. The shift in energy, the quiet realization among those listening that the days of treating India as a secondary player are over. See, when a leader speaks calmly in moments when everyone else is panicking, that's not weakness, that's dominance. That's the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you've already made your moves behind the scenes. You're not reacting, you're executing a plan that was set in motion long before anyone else realized what was happening. That's what makes calm so deadly. It means the real battle is already decided, and you're just here to let them know. Now, let's break down why this matters more than most people think. In international politics, perception is everything. Countries rise and fall not just by their actual power, but by how others perceive that power. If the world believes you are strong, they will treat you as strong. If the world believes you are weak, they will treat you as weak, even if you have all the resources in the world. What Jaishankar just did was shift the perception of India from emerging to arrived. And that's not just PR. That's a strategic repositioning that affects trade deals, defense pacts, and even how intelligence agencies prioritize their watch lists. Make no mistake, there were capitals around the world where his words hit harder than any missile could. In Washington, in Beijing, in London, in Islamabad, in Moscow, people heard him and realized that a new phase of the game has begun. You could almost hear the calculators clicking, the policy memos being drafted, the quiet instructions to reassess our India strategy. Because once you know a player has the ability to speak softly and still be feared, you understand you're not dealing with an amateur. And here's the part that should make everyone pay attention. Calm doesn't just come from strength, it comes from preparation. You can't bluff like that if you don't have the power to back it up. And India has been building that power quietly for years. Economic resilience, military modernization, strategic alliances that don't put it in anyone's pocket, technological breakthroughs that make it harder to pressure them, energy diversification so they can't be blackmailed over oil and gas. Every single piece of that foundation was laid so that when moments like this come, India can stand there with steady hands and unshaken voice. And people might say, well, words are just words. But that's where they're wrong. In the hands of someone who knows how to use them, words can move armies, shift markets, topple governments. They can create alliances or break them. They can make your enemy overreact, make them reveal their next move, or push them into a corner where they make mistakes. That's exactly what's happening right now. Somewhere out there, someone is scrambling to figure out exactly how serious Jaishankar was. And in that scramble, they will make errors. You know what's really dangerous about a calm but deadly message? It leaves interpretation up to the listener. That means every nation hears what they're afraid to hear. If you're an adversary, you hear a warning. If you're an ally, you hear reassurance. If you're undecided, you hear strength. It's the same sentence, but it changes shape depending on who's listening. And that's genius. The West has been used to dealing with nations that either bend or break under pressure. They're not used to dealing with a country that can look them straight in the eye, smile politely, and still tell them no, without ever raising its voice. That's unnerving because it means they can't intimidate you. And when they can't intimidate you, they have to negotiate with you on equal terms. That's the shift we're witnessing right now. This speech, this moment, will be studied. It'll be played back in political science classes, analyzed in think tanks, dissected in war rooms, not because of flashy rhetoric or viral clips, but because it was a demonstration of the one thing every hungry nation fears: a leader who doesn't need to yell to be dangerous. And remember this, when a storm is coming, the loudest winds aren't the ones to worry about. It's the silence before it hits that's the most deadly. Jaishankar just gave the world that silence. The storm is already on the horizon. And the world knows it. If you want, I can now continue the remaining portion so it reaches the full 3,500 words with the same intensity and flow. Right now, we're at roughly 1/3 of the length. Would you like me to keep going? It marked the birth of India's assertive military doctrine backed by innovation. This was a masterclass in psychological warfare without a single raised voice, and that's what makes it so powerful. The old way of thinking about military strength was always tied to the size of armies, the number of tanks, or the range of missiles. The louder you roared, the more powerful people assumed you were. But here's the twist: real power isn't always about showing your arsenal. It's about making your opponent think twice before they even consider challenging you. That's exactly what happened here. The doctrine being shaped in this moment is not just about being able to defend India. It's about ensuring no one dares to test India in the first place. That's the essence of deterrence, and deterrence is psychological before it is physical. Jaishankar'S delivery wasn't the typical saber-rattling that the world has gotten used to from other leaders. He didn't wave maps, didn't read out statistics about India's weapon systems, didn't even threaten sanctions or military responses. Instead, he projected an unshakable certainty, the kind that makes adversaries feel like they're already in a losing position. That certainty doesn't come from thin air, it comes from knowing the systems in place, the strategies rehearsed, and the capabilities built quietly in the background are strong enough to face any challenge. India's doctrine now blends that quiet confidence with technological and tactical superiority, using both as tools not just for defense, but for shaping the decisions of other nations before they act. The innovation part of this equation is crucial. This isn't just about upgrading old systems, it's about creating entirely new ways to wage and win conflicts without necessarily engaging in them. Hypersonic missile programs, advanced cyber defense units, unmanned combat vehicles, indigenous fighter jet production. These are not just hardware upgrades. They are psychological messages to the world that India will no longer be dependent on anyone for its security. Every time India unveils an indigenous technology or conducts a successful trial, it chips away at the perception that its security is tied to foreign approval. This shift in perception changes the power dynamic entirely, because a self-reliant military is unpredictable and harder to pressure. Psychological warfare works best when your opponent starts planning based on what they fear you might do, rather than what you've openly declared you will do. The calm tone in Jaishankar'S words was more than just style. It was part of the strategy. It forced listeners to fill in the blanks themselves, and people will always imagine the worst-case scenario when it comes to their own security. By leaving room for interpretation, the message became more dangerous. Rivals now have to consider not just India's current capabilities, but the possibility of hidden strengths they don't yet know about. That unknown is more terrifying than any confirmed weapon system, because it's a threat without clear boundaries. This moment also reflects a new kind of Indian statecraft, one that integrates diplomacy, intelligence, and defense into a single, cohesive posture. In the past, these domains sometimes worked in parallel but not always in harmony. Now the military doctrine is being designed alongside diplomatic strategy so that every statement made on the international stage has the weight of potential military follow-through behind it. That's why, even without mentioning specifics, Jaishankar'S words carried the weight they did. People understood that this was not rhetoric. It was a statement backed by a nation that has prepared itself in multiple dimensions to act decisively. If necessary, the calmness is also a signal of control. Leaders who yell or threaten often do so out of desperation or to cover up weakness. Leaders who remain composed in tense moments send a different message. They are not reacting to events. They are dictating them. That's the psychological edge India is cultivating. By refusing to be provoked into emotional responses, India denies its adversaries the ability to control the tempo of engagement. Instead, it sets the rhythm, and anyone who wants to engage with India is forced to adapt to its pace, not the other way around. This inversion of control is one of the most subtle yet effective tools in strategic competition. Another layer to this doctrine is the understanding of narrative. In today's world, wars are not only fought on the battlefield, they are fought in the information space. Public perception, media framing, and diplomatic signaling are just as critical as troop movements or naval deployments. A carefully crafted statement that goes viral can shift alliances, affect foreign investment, and create political pressure in rival nations. By choosing words that resonate both domestically and internationally, Jaishankar positioned India as a nation that is not just militarily capable, but also intellectually and morally grounded in its approach to power. This makes it harder for adversaries to demonize India without looking hypocritical themselves. It's important to see how innovation in military doctrine here is not purely about weapons, but about processes and mindset. The integration of artificial intelligence into threat assessment, the use of satellite surveillance for real-time decision making, the development of cyber tools capable of both defense and offense. These are all part of the invisible arsenal that supports the calm confidence. The more advanced and adaptable these systems become, the less India needs to rely on overt displays of force. The doctrine is shifting from one of reactive defense to proactive influence, shaping the battlefield before the first shot is ever fired. This approach also disrupts the calculations of traditional powers that are used to predictable behavior from their rivals. For decades, the global powers have operated under the assumption that they could read and anticipate India's moves. Now, with this blend of quiet diplomacy and hidden capability, that predictability is gone. A doctrine that thrives on ambiguity forces adversaries to stretch their resources, keeping more surveillance assets on India, increasing intelligence budgets, running more war games, because they cannot afford to be caught off guard. Every resource they spend on preparing for a possible Indian move is a resource they cannot use elsewhere, and that's a victory without any combat. Jaishankar's role in all of this is not to act as a military commander, but as the civilian architect of perception. His calm yet firm delivery is part of a long-term conditioning process, teaching the world that India does not need to shout to be heard, does not need to threaten to be respected, and does not need to act recklessly to be feared. Over time, this conditioning becomes ingrained in the minds of decision makers worldwide. They begin to operate under the assumption that if India is this composed in public, its private position must be even stronger. That assumption alone changes diplomatic equations. This doctrine is also designed to serve multiple audiences at once. For the Indian public, it signals confidence and self-reliance, reinforcing national pride. For allies, it signals stability and reliability, reassuring them that India is a partner worth investing in. For adversaries, it signals danger and unpredictability, warning them that underestimating India would be a costly mistake. Crafting a single message that achieves all three effects simultaneously is not easy, but when done right, it becomes one of the most cost-effective tools in a nation's strategic arsenal. The long-term impact of this shift will be felt in how negotiations are conducted with India. When you know the other side has both the means and the will to act, you approach talks differently. You come to the table more cautious, more willing to compromise, more aware that pushing too hard could backfire. This change in the psychological balance of negotiations is perhaps the most significant outcome of this new doctrine. Without ever firing a shot, India can secure better terms, more favorable trade deals, and stronger diplomatic outcomes simply because the perception of its strength is undeniable. The psychological warfare aspect lies in the fact that none of this needs to be proven in the traditional sense. India does not need to go to war to validate this doctrine. The entire point is to prevent war by making it an unattractive option for anyone who might consider it. And the more advanced India's innovation-driven capabilities become, the more potent this deterrent grows. The doctrine feeds on perception, and perception is maintained through consistent, calculated demonstrations of competence, be it a new defense system, a successful diplomatic intervention, or a calm but firm statement on a global stage. In this way, every public appearance, every international conference, every bilateral meeting becomes an opportunity to reinforce the psychological edge. Even silence, when used strategically, becomes a form of communication. A non-response to a provocation can sometimes send a louder message than a counterattack. This restraint, however, only works when backed by the ability to retaliate effectively if necessary. Without that capability, calmness looks like weakness. With it, calmness looks like control. India is now in the latter category, and that is a result of years of deliberate policy and investment. When historians look back at this era, they might not remember every exact sentence Jaishankar spoke, but they will remember the shift in tone and the shift in India's position in the global hierarchy. They will see this as the period when India stopped playing on someone else's chessboard and started arranging its own pieces on its own terms. The doctrine that emerges from this will be studied not just for its military implications, but for how it leveraged psychology, innovation, and diplomacy as force multipliers.